Hello, and welcome to our video looking at the rise of absolute rulers in Russia. To examine this, we're going to look at it in three parts. So, first, look at how both of the Ivans kind of consolidated power and set up things for Peter the Great, who's known as one of the best Russian rulers of all time. And then we'll look at some of Peter's reforms and kind of how he leaves Russia at the end of this era. But before we can talk about the Ivans, we first have to talk about the Mongols. So the Mongols are going to rule over Russia from the 13th to the 15th century, and the Russian Empire there is known as the Golden Horde. And the Mongols have a profound impact on Russia's political, economic, and cultural development, including the rise of Moscow as a dominant power for the Russian Empire. The Mongols are the ones that really start centralizing power in Russia. So they have a few regional princes that are kind of running provinces, but they're all going to report back to, the leader of the Golden Horde, that Khan. We see a rise of Orthodox Christianity. They're actually going to kind of promote it and encourage it in Russia, and that's why it kind of takes on from there. And then they make Moscow the capital city of Russia, um, which becomes, important later on. We also see that because of Mongol rule, we start to see this creation of Russian identity. Now, think about Russia spans over, it's a whole continent's worth of land essentially over Eurasia. And so, this idea that there's people that are alike, within that group, and then the people that are not, like the Mongols, that helps establish that sense of identity. They also have the first kind of true census happening in the Mongol Empire. So, they're keeping track of who lives there and it helps create an efficient tax system that the Russian rulers will use later on. And all of that kind of leaves us with the two Ivans, which we'll dive into next. So we'll start with Ivan III, and he's known for unifying Russia and breaking free of the Golden Horde, so finally getting the Mongols out of Russia. And he furthers that creation of a centralized state. And one of the first things he does is he tries to reduce the power of the boyars, who are the nobility of Russia. So that should sound pretty familiar to you, thinking about what other absolute monarchs do. He's going to take the title of czar. So, claiming that he's descendant of the same type of power as the Caesars of Rome. And he actually claims that Russia is the third Rome. So the first Rome is like true Rome. The second Rome is the Byzantine Empire, who is kind of the descendants of what was the Roman Empire. And he's like, you know what? We're here. We are the third Rome now. And he rebuilds and expands the Kremlin, which is kind of like the central building for Russia, and it's going to be this big symbol of power and authority. So again, you should already see the makings of absolutism from what Ivan III's doing. So after him comes Ivan the Fourth, or better known as Ivan the Terrible. And I mean, just look at that picture. Like that guy does not look like a good guy. He does make some reforms. So he creates a law code in 1550, which modernizes the legal procedures and helps also increase tax collection, which is important. He creates a large standing army and he is going to strengthen the power of the central government. So, again, taking power away from the boyars and the people that, might move against him. What Ivan is better known for, though, is his reign of terror across Russia. He is not well, like, he is not mentally a well man. He orchestrates what's called the Oprichnina, which is a period of paranoia and violence in Russia. And it's this special police force that's created that's meant to suppress the boyars. It's literally just like a pointing fingers game, like you're against the government, no, you are, that sort of thing. And thousands of boyars, so these noble people, are either executed or exiled. And what that does is it really shifts power towards the czar because remember, Russia was still very feudal at this point in time, and those boyars were really powerful as feudal lords. And what he's doing is he's taking those local lords away and making it where the people have to be more loyal to the government. He's also going to increase laws on serfs and peasants and tie them more closely to the land so they don't really have an option of where to go or who to follow. And I mean, one of the more famous things about him is that, in his own rage, he ends up killing his son, his heir. And when Ivan the Terrible dies, it plunges Russia into what's called the time of troubles. It's this 15-year time period of famine and major political upheaval where they're trying to figure out like who's going to take over this throne. And the remaining kind of royal families are all trying to kind of fight each other for the throne. And so the end result is that the Romanov family ends up taking over. Which brings us to Peter the Great, because Peter the Great is a descendant, I think it's the grandson of the original Romanov that takes the throne. And Peter is known as one of the greatest rulers of Russian history. Early on in his rule, he's going to build in some different things that also help centralize the state. He's going to create service obligations for the army, kind of expand on those so that it's like every royal person kind of has to serve in the army for a short period of time, but also like most peasant people have to serve as well. So it creates this large army. He really wants control or access to warm water ports. So he wants access to the Black Sea, which is currently controlled by the Ottomans. And he does actually conquer that area and build a navy post there in 1697. And once he does that, he's like, we don't really have a whole lot of like ship technology because we've never had access to these types of ports before. So he goes on this 18-month tour of Western Europe to learn more about how people, run their navies. He tries to create some diplomatic relations during that time, get friendly with some of the other European monarchs. And what he does is he brings back with him 100 foreign experts in different, forms of fashions to help improve Russia's technology and infrastructure. And it's through those experts that he's able to really help bring Russia into the 17th century and become of a world superpower. So they implement a lot of different Western policies. Um, they even go as far as like trying to change their culture, right? Like they change their style of dress. There's the famous like beard tax, all of those things. But one of the other things he does is he starts to give some additional power back to the boyars and make them a little bit more happy. So he knows that they're not kind of out to get him all the time. And he does this because he wants to ensure their control of the serfs. Remember, Russia is still feudal. Even with Peter the Great's reforms, those reforms don't really extend to the lower classes. Speaking of reforms, let's go ahead and start talking about what Peter does that kind of helps Russia propel itself forward. The first thing he does is some military reforms. So he enforces, like I said earlier, that all boyars are forced to join either the military or work as government officials so that they have that kind of patriotic sense of duty around them. And then he expands the size of the army and increased the size of Russia. So he actually uses that army to go expand and start taking over some places. He introduces new modern weaponry and tactics that he gets from visiting France and other Western powers. And remember, during this time, France is kind of at its peak of technology, innovation, and culture. His major goal is that he wants to westernize Russia and make it more modern. So he does things that will introduce Western ideas to the everyday people. He introduces Western fashion. They're not allowed to wear those long tunic sort of dress looking things that peasants used to wear. They have to wear pants now. The nobles are forced to cut their beards, or otherwise they'd have to wear a beard tax because he saw that Europeans were clean shaven. Women are no longer wearing veils that hide their face because, that's not the European fashion. And he builds St. Petersburg, which, love it when you can name a city after yourself, which is the first warm port city in Russia. And it allows for a lot more trade. And we'll talk more about St. Petersburg here in a minute. St. Petersburg is really his like ode to Europe. He builds it to imitate Western European architectural styles. Specifically, he wants it to look like Versailles. And so you can kind of see from the picture there, it does have a lot of similar aspects as Versailles. He names it after himself, and it means to show his wealth and power. Again, this is what absolute monarchs do. These are all traits of absolute monarchs. He also puts it in St. Petersburg specifically because he wants to increase economic opportunity in Russia. And he calls St. Petersburg the window to Europe because it does lie on those kind of key trading routes to Europe for this time period. He also starts looking around and says, a lot of those European monarchs are also the head of their own church. I should do that too. And so he came to control the Orthodox Church. So the Eastern Orthodox Christianity is what they've been practicing, um, you know, for a long time at this point. But abolishes the patriarch. So just imagine that like the Pope is no longer there. That's what the patriarch is. He's like, okay, nope, I don't need the patriarch anymore. I'm going to be in charge of the church. And the church comes under government control. So you do see another example of absolutism in action. He also creates this clergy that reports directly to him to make decisions regarding the church. So he's always ensuring that the message the church is sending to people is the message he wants them to send. And finally, a few just kind of additional reforms. He's going to found the Russian Academy of Science because, he wants to keep all of that innovation and education going. And he's produces a lot of education reform, specifically for universities. And he wants people coming to these universities, and he wants to create a space where academics feel welcome. He moves serfs and Cossacks into Siberia to fill land. He's like, we've got a lot of land in this empire that is not inhabited by people, and that's not good. We need to move people there so that it feels like we're creating a broader empire. And then one of his more shining achievements here, he introduces the potato to Europe, and it becomes a staple crop. Or sorry, not just to Europe, but to Russia. And I did Google it in case you're wondering, because Russia's major drink is vodka, which is made from potatoes. And I was like, oh my gosh, did you see the reason that they have vodka? But no, they had vodka before. It just wasn't made with potatoes. It was made with grains, which I guess is different. But you know, salute to Russia. They finally have their drink of choice, and they have potatoes, which are great. And that's really all we have for, absolutism in Russia. You should have seen through the Ivans and then through Peter the Great a lot of centralization of power, controlling the nobility, the naming buildings after themselves, cities even, all of those things contribute to absolutism and absolute power. So thanks for watching.